My boss cornered me after a work event and nobody believed me. My boss wouldn't take no for an answer. When I went to HR, they treated me like I was the problem. 2 weeks later, she announced she was pregnant at work and said it was mine. Now she's daring me to speak up because, and I'm quoting here, nobody will believe you. I'm a guy in my late 20s. I work a normal office job, nothing glamorous. I'm not some influencer. I'm not rich. I'm not important. And I'm saying that because every time I've tried to talk about what happened, people react like I must be leaving something out. Like there has to be a twist where I'm secretly the bad guy. It started with my manager. Her name was Paige. She was early 30s, confident, funny, the kind of person who can walk into a room and it tilts toward her without anyone noticing. She was also the kind of manager who acts like your friend. The jokes, the little compliments, the I've got your back stuff. At first I liked working for her because she wasn't cold or robotic. She'd talk to people like we were humans, not just bodies at desks. She'd say things like, "I'm proud of you when you nailed something," which felt nice because most managers act like praise is a limited resource. Then it got weird. It was little stuff at first. She'd stand too close when she asked me something, like shoulder to shoulder instead of across my desk. She'd touch my arm when she laughed, not a quick tap, but like a second too long. Once, we were in the break room and she said, "You clean up better than you look in your hoodie." I laughed because what else do you do? It wasn't the worst thing I'd ever heard, but it stuck in my head. A week later, we had a team lunch. She sat next to me. Not by chance. It was obvious she chose that seat. She leaned in and said, "You're my favorite on the team, you know." I said something generic like, "I'm glad I'm doing good." And she said, "No, I mean I like you, like, as a person." I didn't know how to respond. So I smiled and nodded and tried to keep it light. The more I tried to keep it light, the more she seemed to push. She started texting me about work stuff after hours. Then it became not work stuff. At first it was harmless. Memes. Complaining about traffic. Then it became personal. "What are you doing tonight? Are you seeing anyone? Why are you always so private?" I'd answer vaguely. I'd keep it polite. I didn't want to be rude to my manager, because I'm not stupid. I know how jobs work. The first time I tried to put up a real boundary was when she asked me to come by her place to help her set up her new TV. I said no. I said I wasn't comfortable with that. I said I didn't think it was appropriate. She replied with a laughing emoji and said, "Oh my God, relax, you're not that important." That should have made me feel better, right? But it didn't. Because she asked again 2 days later. Then she asked if I wanted to grab a drink after work. I said no. She said, "You're making this weird." That was her favorite phrase. Anytime I said no, she said I was making it weird. Then she started doing this thing where she'd get cold when I didn't play along. Not openly hostile, just different. She'd forget to CC me on emails that mattered. She'd stop giving me the heads up she gave everyone else. She'd act like I was a disappointment. And then, when I'd look stressed, she'd flip back into being sweet. "Hey, you okay? You've been quiet. You can talk to me." It was like being trained. Say yes, you get warmth. Say no, you get punished. I didn't have the words for it at the time, but looking back, it was control. The worst night happened after a company event. We had one of those work social things where everyone pretends they're having fun because there's free food and nobody wants to look like a loser. There was alcohol. Not a lot, but enough. I had 2 beers over a couple hours. I was fine. I drove myself. Paige was drinking too. She was louder than usual. She kept bumping my shoulder and doing that thing where she'd say something in my ear like we were already some kind of secret. When the event ended, she asked me to help carry some stuff to her car. I know what you're thinking. Why would you do that? Because she was my manager. Because it was work stuff. Because saying no had consequences and I was tired of being treated like an enemy. We got to the parking lot and she said she didn't feel safe driving. She said she was a little tipsy and asked if I could drive her home. I hesitated. She said, "Come on. I thought you were a good guy." I drove her home. The whole drive she acted half drunk, half sober. Like she was performing. She'd go quiet, then suddenly laugh, then go quiet again. When we got to her place, she asked me to come inside, just for a minute. She said she needed water and she didn't want to be alone. I said no. I said I'd wait outside while she got water. She started crying. Not big sobs. More like wet eyes and a shaky voice. She said, "You don't even care about me." I was standing there in her driveway like a complete idiot, trying to figure out how my life got to this point, where I'm being guilt-tripped by my boss in the dark. I went inside. That's the part I hate. Because it's the part people latch onto. They hear I went inside, and they stop listening. They decide the rest is my fault. Inside, she didn't get water. She sat on the couch and patted the space next to her. I didn't sit. I told her I needed to go. She stood up, stepped close to me and put her hand on my chest. She said, "You know you want this. I said no. I said I didn't want this. She laughed like I was being cute. She kissed me. I turned my head. I pulled back. I said no again. I remember thinking, if I push her away hard, she'll fall, and then what? Then I'm the guy who shoved his drunk manager. So I tried to leave. She blocked the doorway. I told her to move. She said, "Don't be dramatic." That phrase again. She put her hands on me and started pulling me back toward the couch. I froze. And I hate admitting that, because freezing sounds weak. But I froze because my brain was doing math. If I raise my voice, she can say I threatened her. If I shove her, she can say I hit her. If I leave and she hurts herself, she can say I abandoned her while she was drunk. So I did what I always do when I feel trapped. I tried to keep it calm. I said, "Paige, stop, I'm leaving." She looked at me and her face changed. Like the mask dropped for a second. She said, "Nobody's going to believe you." That's the line I can't forget. Nobody's going to believe you. She kept pushing. I kept saying no. I stopped fighting because I felt like fighting would ruin my life faster. When I left her apartment, I sat in my car and just stared at the steering wheel for a long time. I didn't feel like I got lucky. I felt sick. I drove home, showered, and then I sat on my bed shaking like I was freezing. I didn't sleep. The next day at work, she acted normal. Not guilty, not awkward. Normal. She smiled at me across the office like we shared a joke. She sent me a message. "Last night was fun. Don't be weird." That was it. I didn't reply. Later she sent another. "You're quiet today. You okay?" I still didn't reply. Then she stopped being sweet. She called me into her office and closed the door. She said, "Are you going to make this a problem?" I said I didn't want to talk about it. She said, "I knew you'd do this. You're going to punish me." I said I didn't consent to what happened. Her face went blank. Then she laughed. She said, "You're not seriously going to say that?" I said no. She said, "You didn't stop me." I swear to God I felt something break in me. Then she leaned back in her chair like she had all the time in the world and said, "If you try to ruin my job, I'll ruin your life." I walked out of her office and went into the bathroom and threw up. I told myself I should report it. I told myself I should go to HR. But I've lived on Earth long enough to know how that goes. So I started documenting things. I took screenshots of her messages. I emailed myself notes with dates and times, like I was building a case file against my own life. I kept it together for about 2 weeks. Then Paige started retaliating. She started writing me up for tiny things. Stuff that was never a problem before. A report that was too late, even though it wasn't late. A tone in an email that was unprofessional. A meeting I supposedly missed that I was never invited to. My coworkers noticed something was off, but no one wanted to get involved. One guy told me quietly, "She's in a mood, don't take it personally." Don't take it personally. It was personal. It was my life. I went to HR. I did it on a Friday afternoon because I didn't want to spend the whole week waiting for it. I asked for a private meeting. HR was a woman named Cheryl. She had that calm flat voice like everything is paperwork. I told her Paige was crossing boundaries. I didn't even start with the worst part. I started small because I thought if I came in too heavy, they'd shut down. I said she was texting me after hours. I said she was touching me. I said she was pressuring me to spend time alone with her. I said she was retaliating after I rejected her. Cheryl's face didn't change. She said, "Do you have proof?" I said yes. I showed her the texts. Cheryl looked at them and said, "This doesn't look threatening." I said it's not threatening on paper, but it's my manager. Cheryl said, "Have you told her you're not interested?" I said yes. Cheryl said, "Sometimes people misread signals." I said I told her no. Cheryl nodded like she was humoring a child. Then I told her about that night. I didn't use graphic language. I didn't try to dramatize it. I said no. I said I tried to leave. I said she blocked me. I said she said nobody would believe me. Cheryl stared at me for a few seconds and then said, "That's a serious allegation." I said, "It happened." Cheryl said, "Are you sure you didn't regret it after?" I remember just blinking at her. I said, "No, I'm sure." Cheryl said, "Okay, we'll look into it." Then she said something that made my stomach drop even more. She said, "In the meantime, you should be careful about how you discuss this with others. Spreading rumors can create liability. So basically, shut up." I left that meeting feeling smaller than I ever have. The following Monday, Paige called me into her office again. She said, "HR told me you're uncomfortable." She said it like she was mocking me. Then she said, "You really want to play this game?" I didn't respond. She said, "Good luck." 2 weeks later, she announced she was pregnant. She did it in the office. She walked into our morning meeting with a smile and said, "I have some exciting news, I'm expecting." Everyone clapped. People cheered. Someone said, "That's amazing." Paige looked straight at me when she said it. I felt the blood drain out of my face. I didn't even know if it was mine. I didn't even know if it was true. After the meeting, she caught me by the coffee machine. She said quietly, "We need to talk." My stomach felt like it was full of rocks. She said, "It's yours." Just like that. I said, "No, it can't be." She said, "It is." I said, "I didn't." She cut me off. She said, "Don't do that. You're not going to make me the crazy pregnant lady." Then she said, "You're going to support me. Or I'll tell everyone what you did." I said, "What I did?" She leaned in and whispered, "You know, I'll say you took advantage of me." I stood there with my coffee in my hand like my body forgot how to work. I asked her if she was keeping it. She said, "Obviously." I asked if she was sure it was mine. She said, "Do you want me to go public with this conversation?" She walked away smiling. I went home and told my brother. He's the only person I trust with something like this. He listened, and when I got to the part about Paige saying nobody would believe me, he got quiet. Then he said, "You need to be careful. This can ruin you." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "That's horrible." Just be careful. I don't blame him. That's the world we live in. The next week, Paige told HR that I had been harassing her. She said I was making inappropriate comments. She said I was obsessed with her. She said I was trying to intimidate her. HR called me into a meeting. Cheryl was there. So was Paige. So was a guy from legal. Paige was crying. Not real crying. Performance crying. She said she felt unsafe. She said she was scared to come to work. She said she didn't know what I was capable of. Cheryl looked at me and said, "We take these claims very seriously." I said, "This is retaliation." Paige shook her head and said, "He's lying." Then she said, "I didn't want to say this, but I'm pregnant." Everyone's eyes flicked to her stomach like it was evidence. Paige said, "And I think it might be his." Cheryl's face changed instantly. It wasn't neutral anymore. It was protective. Cheryl looked at me and said, "Is that true?" I said, "No." Paige said, "See, he's denying it." I said, "I didn't consent to what happened." The room went dead. Cheryl said, "That's an incredibly serious claim." I said, "I told you, weeks ago." Cheryl looked uncomfortable for the first time. The legal guy said, "At this point we need to focus on maintaining a safe work environment." Then he said, "We're placing you on administrative leave while we investigate." Paige sniffed and said, "Thank you." I couldn't believe it. I walked out of that building and sat in my car and laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was unreal. Within 2 days, people at work knew. Not the real story. Their version. The version where Paige is a pregnant woman being harassed by her employee. The version where I'm some creep. A coworker I thought was friendly texted me, "Dude, what did you do?" Another texted, "You should have known better." My mom called me crying because she'd heard something happened and she was scared. I didn't even know what to tell her. How do you tell your mom your boss coerced you and now you're being painted as the predator? I asked HR for updates. Cheryl said the investigation was ongoing. Paige posted a pregnancy announcement on social media. It was full of soft lighting and new chapter captions. People from work commented hearts. I started getting messages from people I didn't even know. One said, "Leave her alone." One said, "Men like you are the reason women are scared." One said, "If you were a real man you'd take responsibility." Take responsibility. That phrase again. It doesn't matter if you didn't choose it. It doesn't matter if you said no. It doesn't matter if you were cornered. You're a man. So you take responsibility. A week later, HR called me in again. Cheryl said they couldn't substantiate my complaint. She said there wasn't enough evidence. I asked her about the texts. She said, "Texts can be interpreted." I asked about Paige's retaliation. She said, "Performance issues were documented." I said, "By her." Cheryl nodded like I was missing the point. Then she told me I could return to work, but I'd be moved to another team under a different manager. I asked if Paige would face consequences for what she did. Cheryl said, "Paige is also experiencing a very stressful time." That sentence made me feel like my throat was closing. She's experiencing a stressful time. Like I wasn't. Then Cheryl said, "We also need to address Paige's complaint about harassment. She's willing to drop it if there's a mutual agreement to have no contact outside necessary work functions." Like she was doing me a favor. I asked about the pregnancy claim. Cheryl said, "That's a private matter." I said, "She said it in the HR meeting." Cheryl said, "If it becomes relevant legally, you can handle it then." So basically, I'm on my own. I went back to work under a new manager, and everyone treated me differently. Nobody said it to my face, but you can feel it. The slight distance, the cautious smiles, the way people stop talking when you walk up. Paige avoided me in the hallway, but not fully. Sometimes she'd walk past and smile like she knew a secret. Then one afternoon, I got an email from her personal address. It was short. "I'm keeping it. You can do this the easy way or the hard way. That's it. No apology." No discussion. Just a threat. I showed the email to my brother. He said, "You need a lawyer. I can't afford a lawyer like that. Not the kind you need for this." I looked into legal aid. I looked into consultations. Every option felt like another mountain. I'm not even sure the baby is mine. I'm not even sure she's telling the truth. But she has all the power. She can go public. She can go legal. She can smear me. And even if I'm innocent, I still lose. My job is fragile now. My name is already weird in the building. And I feel like I'm watching my life get rewritten by someone else. The part that keeps messing with my head is how easy it was for everyone to pick a side. Nobody asked how I was doing. Nobody asked if I was okay. I was either the villain or I was nothing. I still wake up sometimes and hear her voice. Nobody's going to believe you. And the worst part is, she was right. I don't know what the right move is. I don't know if I should disappear and let her write whatever story she wants, or fight and risk losing everything anyway. I just know I'm exhausted, and I'm scared, and I hate that I'm scared. Because I know how it sounds when a man says he's scared. And I hate that I'm even thinking that. I hate that this has made me suspicious of people I used to trust. I hate that it's made me quiet. I hate that I can't even talk about it without feeling like I'm asking permission to be taken seriously. If you were told nobody would believe you and then your job turned it into your fault, what would you do? Let me know in the comments.
Thanks for watching. If you got this far, leave a comment, like if you liked it, and follow for more.